Today's gospel reading is Matthew 16, 13 through 20. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you," he asked, "who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." And then he warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. This is the word of the Lord, and herein lies our trust. You know, what comes to mind when you think about a minister? You know, if you're like most people, you think about church buildings, you think about pulpits, you think about preachers, you think about priests, you think about, all those things that go along with that, missionaries, Bible school teachers, and yes, even the boys on the bikes. But, all those things are what you think about. But what about you? Do you come to mind? Are you a minister? Do you consider yourself a minister? When I first came here in 2002, Pastor Leonard told me that we are all ministers in this world, including me. And I remember thinking, "Lady, you don't know where I've been. You don't know the things that I've done." I was thinking, because, I felt like I'm not worthy of holding, that kind of esteemed honor. It's kind of like running for political office. I knew that it was never an option for me. Because, the dirt they could dig up. It would be mudslinging for days. As I really thought about it more, I thought, and even if I were to minister to someone, how could they take me seriously knowing what I've done? Or, even more, how importantly, how could I take me seriously knowing what I've done and where I've been? But eventually I realized that yes, I was a minister, not because I was called to love people, but because I already did. And so I've continued spreading those words of wisdom that Pastor Linda gave me so many years ago. And as clearly as I stood here then, and as clearly as I stand here now, I tell you that you are a minister. You are a minister. And when I say those words, I see the doubt. It's kind of bubbling up. You're like, "Oh, no, not me. You must be mistaken." But I'm not mistaken, because Jesus, he has called all of us through the Great Commission to make disciples in his name and to love one another. But even so, some of you feel like, how in the world can you be a minister? You're not that holy, you say? You don't know the Bible like the back of your hand? You can't rattle off verse after verse? Heck, you're not even sure how the rapture works. How in the world can you be a minister, you say to yourself? And I'm not talking minister the noun. I am talking minister the verb. To help and to serve in the name of Jesus. And so over the years, and talking with a lot of you, what I hear most is, how in the world can you speak the perfection of the gospel through such an imperfect life, with such imperfect lips? Sometimes it's easy to feel like, well, how in the world can you lead people to God when you've fallen so way off track yourself? The last thing you want to be is one of those churchy hypocrites. The ones where they say one thing and then they do another. That's not who we want to be. As you look at your life, it's always easy to see and remember the bad stuff, those points of failure. And it's even easier to skim over the good stuff in the face of those things. And it's kind of like watching the news. Goodness is never, ever the main story. It's never breaking news. It's only an afterthought amongst the flood of the bad storm. And that's if there's room. When you reflect on your story, you tend to see all the costly mistakes that you made, and the regretted words that haunt you, that echo in your mind. You see all the painful, failed relationships that led you to some poignantly unchristian moments. I could tell you some stories. But you recollect all those times of great downfall, that spiraling faith, terrible mistakes made, and times when you just didn't live your best. And then you ask yourself again, how in the world can I be a minister? And you ponder, what kind of example have I been? And so you say, well, Okay? As soon as you get your life all cleaned up, as soon as you get it in perfect order, spotless, then you'll answer the call to minister. So when will that be? Along those lines, do you know anyone, I mean anyone at all, now or in the past, holy or not, who has ever had their life in perfect order? Free from perfection or faults or mistakes? No, of course not. You see, the gospel is not about perfection, nor does it expect it. You know, as we continue in Matthew today, it is clear that Peter, whose name means rock, has received a serious promotion. He is given the keys to the kingdom. And leading up to this, Jesus, he is challenged by the Pharisees and the Sadducees in the verses just before, and they insist, they say, Jesus, you better give us a sign. And not only does Jesus not perform on demand, he warns the disciples, says, you need to be careful of them. Be careful of their teachings. So Jesus, knowing that he was being rejected and the false temple teaching, he realizes more than ever the need to form a new faith community, a new church, one that would stand on his authority and his authority alone. The people needed authenticity. The people needed truth in their worship like never before. It was now clear that even with Jesus on the scene, that would not be coming from the current temple, from the current leadership. Jesus, he knew his death was imminent. So he begins to lay the groundwork for this new church to be built. Today he gathers his disciples. He calls them to him and he says, who do the people say that the Son of Man is? Who are they saying I am, he says. And they all look at each other and they all begin answering at once. Well, some say John the Baptist. Well, and some say Elijah. Still others say Jeremiah or some of the other prophets. Jesus listens. And then he turns the question and he directs it deeply personal to them. And he says, well, who do you say that I am? Not who do you think that I am, not who do you know that I am, but who do you say that I am? And the chattering of the disciples went deathly silent in that moment. Because it was a dangerous time to be a follower of Jesus during there. If they professed it, they could be arrested, they could be executed, hauled into court. The fear was real. We know that from John the Baptist and his murder. But even amongst that fear, one of the disciples, he overcomes that and he steps forward, and it is Peter, and he is the rock who cries out. He says, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God. I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to exclaim it. And Jesus, he's so proud. He says, oh, you are so blessed. And I tell you that you, Peter, you're the rock that I'm going to build my church, and I will give you the keys to the kingdom. It was a serious promotion. If we ever doubted his position amongst the disciples, we certainly know it now. Whenever we get promoted nowadays in our life, it's usually because we have a great track record. Usually we're doing really good at our job, and that's why we get promoted. So Peter must have had an amazing track record, an unshakable faith to receive the keys to the kingdom, and certainly so to be the rock of the church, right? Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Peter, he often falls short, and he fails to be a perfect discipleship. He fails to be. Just a few days earlier, Jesus called him, ye of little faith. Peter is constantly missing the point. He often speaks without thinking, and he will even deny Jesus 3 times. Why in the world would someone build a church upon someone so imperfect? Clearly, his promotion is not based on perfection. So then on what is it based? It is clear from this passage that what Jesus is responding to is not Peter's righteousness, but rather his spoken word. And many denominations will disagree, and they'll talk about succession and different things. But Peter himself is not the rock, not any more than John the Baptist or Elijah are the rock. It is Peter's testimony that is the rock. It is his story. It is his story that leads to, that is the foundation of the church. As I imagine all the disciples and they're standing there, they've all had very similar experiences with Christ. I have no doubt that they have similar faiths, but a faith that is kept inside is no match for a faith that's spoken and it becomes alive. You see, the rocks must cry out. You see, Peter, he was not perfect, nor do you have to be. gospel does not expect it from you. As you journey in ministering, you just have to be willing to let it out, to exclaim it with absolute boldness and fearlessly, no matter what the cost. So as you remember your mistakes, your flaws, those times when you got really, really lost, not that kind of lost, your errors and the roles that they play, you know, you have to think about what role do they play when you think about those things. And so to find out, we look at Peter's journey for those answers. When the disciples, you know, they were in trouble on the stormy sea, we talked about it 2 weeks ago. Jesus comes to them, he's walking on the water, and he calls Peter to him. He says, "Come to me on the water." And Peter begins to walk, but he begins to doubt. He gets fearful, and he begins to sink. And Jesus, he reaches out, and they lock arms, like brothers in arms, and he pulls him up to safety. And the other disciples, well, they never left the boat. I believe with all of my being that this moment profoundly changed Peter, because the Almighty's saving grace was no longer something that was spoken, but rather it was something that was touched. You never forget a near drowning experience, and you never forget the hand that saved you. Peter experienced it with the full range of his emotions, and it changed him, and that is why the rock Peter cries out. This is why Peter is able to speak with such boldness of character in today's scripture, while the other disciples remain silent. They never left the boat. You too can be a bold character. You can cry out. It's like today's psalm says, now that God is emboldening you. He is emboldening you. You see, every time you find yourself afloat in failure, riddled with mistakes, drowning in doubt, it is a magnificent doorway to grace, and it's opening up the love of a mighty King, and it will change you. So you see, the very things that you thought kept you from ministering are the very things that allow you to do it with such magnificence, with such certainty, because you have lived it, because you have touched it, because you have received it. And through this, your ministry has more power than you ever dreamed. People's lives are changed when you are willing to speak and act on Christ's behalf. Peter's story reminds us that Jesus purposefully built his church on imperfect people. Imperfect people willing to speak out. So now I want you to imagine this morning on your way to church. Maybe you stopped at Starbucks, maybe you stopped at the bank to get your offering, the store, wherever you stopped. And as you're there, a stranger comes up to me and says, hey, who's Jesus? I want you to imagine what you'd answer to them. And then you thought, well, that was weird. And then you go on your way, and you come here to the church, and you come in the back door, and instead of me in this black robe, it's Jesus, and he's in this gloriously white robe. And you come in, and he gets down, and he walks over to you, and he puts his hand on your shoulder, and he says, "Who do you say that I am?" If your answer did not match the same one that you gave to the stranger, then we've got work to do. We've got work to do. We must minister and speak as if Jesus was standing right next to us, or if we were doing it to Jesus, ministering and speaking to him. The call of today's gospel is for you to realize that you are the rock of this church, one of the many rocks that are broken off the mountain that is Christ. And through your spoken word, you have been given the keys to the kingdom. Your testimony has the ability to unlock heaven's door for someone who so desperately needs it. We see that in our community, your testimony can help people who are having doubts about even living. Your testimony can open that door for them, that door to grace, that door to hope. And man, in knowing that, how in the world can you keep quiet? How in the world can you mute your testimony in any way? Paul really hits it on the head today. He says, use whatever gift it is that you have. If it's serving, then serve. If you're a teacher, then teach. If you're to encourage, then encourage. If you're to give generously. If you're to lead, then lead diligently. If it's to give mercy, then do it cheerfully. However you love, that is your special and unique gift only to you. And that is your method of ministry. Most of you don't even know it yet, but you're already doing it. You are already a minister. You're already hugging. You're wiping tears. You're holding people when they cry. You're being a good friend. You're listening. You're helping people out. But imagine how much more powerful it would be if you said, not only am I here for you, but God is too. Because our power is limited. But God's power is not. We can only do so much. But we leave an open door for miracles to happen in their life. So in the spirit of Peter today, we celebrate our imperfections, knowing that Jesus is counting on us to build that new faith community that we still need here today. The rocks will cry out.
We call him Father, we trust